Welcome, everyone, to Silas Grave Stories, where I share the kind of tales that might just make you double check the shadows around you. Before we get started, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories that will stick with you long after they're over. And hey, quick question. What time is it where you are right now? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to see how many of you are listening in the dead of night. All right, let's get into tonight's story. It started like any other day after school. I was just sitting on my bed, scrolling through Instagram like I always do. My mind was on autopilot as I checked my notifications. Then, something caught my attention, a new follower. I didn't have many followers, so whenever I got one, I'd usually check out their profile. This one was just like any other. The username was JohnnyFlowers24, and the profile picture was just a default icon. Nothing too weird. But then I looked at his posts. None. Not a single photo, just an empty profile. I thought, okay, maybe it's some bot or someone who's just starting out. But then I saw the comment under one of my photos, a heart emoji. No words, no context, just that. It seemed harmless, but for some reason it made me feel uneasy. I didn't know this person. They were just another random follower, right? I shrugged it off and went about my day, but the thought of it kept lingering in the back of my mind. The next day, everything seemed normal. School was the usual grind. But when I was walking home, I pulled out my phone to kill time. I checked Instagram again out of habit, and there it was. A comment from that same guy, JohnnyFlowers24. Another heart emoji under a different photo. That's when things started to feel off. I didn't know who he was. I didn't even know if it was a real person, but something about the whole thing made me uneasy. He had no profile pictures, no posts, just that blank profile. Why was he commenting on my photos? It was starting to feel like I was being watched. As I turned the corner onto my street, I noticed someone up ahead. It was a guy, tall with long, dark hair and a brown jacket that looked too thick for the weather. I didn't recognize him, but something about his posture, the way he was standing there, just felt wrong. As I got closer, he looked at me and smiled, an unnervingly wide smile. He took a step toward me and said, "Hey, it's me, JohnnyFlowers24." I froze. My stomach dropped. This was the guy from Instagram. The guy who had been leaving those weird heart emojis on my photos. I didn't know what to say, so I just awkwardly muttered a hey and kept walking. He didn't move. Just kept standing there, smiling at me. It felt like he was staring right through me, not blinking once. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding. As I got further down the street, I could still feel his eyes on me, watching my every move. I didn't turn around. I just wanted to get home. Later that night, after I'd tried to push the whole thing out of my mind, I sat down in my room trying to forget about the weird encounter. I was scrolling through Instagram again when my phone buzzed. It was a message from him. The message read, "I'm closer than you think." My blood ran cold. How did he know I was on Instagram? How did he know where I was? I quickly opened the message and saw no other text, just a weird, blurry picture. It was hard to make out, but it seemed like a street, the street I lived on. The one I walked down every day. I turned off my phone, my hands shaking. There was no way this could be real. No way a stranger I'd never met could be so invasive. But the feeling in my gut told me something was wrong. It wasn't just a coincidence. It was Sunday. My parents were out of town visiting some friends for the day, and I was home alone. It was late, maybe around 11 p.m. The whole house was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I didn't expect anything unusual, but then my phone buzzed again. It was him. JohnnyFlowers24. The message was simple. "I see you." I froze. My pulse raced. I quickly jumped out of my bed and peeked through my window. The yard was dark, the trees barely visible against the black sky. But I didn't see anything, no movement, nothing. That's when I heard the knock. It wasn't a gentle tap. It was a loud, insistent knock, like someone was trying to get my attention. My heart was pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to do. My phone buzzed again and I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. The knock had rattled me enough. I slowly stood up, trying to make as little noise as possible, and crept out of my room. My heart was hammering in my chest, and I had to force myself not to panic. I was alone in the house, and my only defense was my own wits. I quietly walked downstairs, making sure to avoid any creaky steps. I reached the front door, staying out of sight. There was no way I was going to open that door, not after the messages. Instead, I crouched down, my back pressed against the wall, and peeked through the window by the door. I could see nothing but darkness. The yard was quiet. I held my breath, waiting for something, anything, to move. But all I could hear was the faint rustle of the trees outside. It didn't make sense. I had just received those creepy messages. Why was there no one here? Then I saw something that made my stomach flip. A shadow. It was faint at first, but as my eyes adjusted, I could make out the figure of someone standing in the darkness, just beyond the yard. The person was just standing there, completely still, like they were waiting for something. The tall figure was facing the house, but it was too far away for me to see their face clearly. My pulse quickened as I strained to see more. It was him. I knew it was. Johnny Flowers, 24. I felt a wave of panic rise up in me. Was he just standing out there, waiting for me to do something? I couldn't be sure, but it felt like he knew exactly where I was. I backed away from the window, heart racing. I felt like I was in a horror movie, but this wasn't some over-the-top plot. It was real. Too real. I stood there frozen, unsure of what to do. The figure outside didn't move. It was as if time had stopped. I felt my mind race, trying to come up with some kind of plan. What if he was just trying to scare me? What if he had somehow gotten into my head and was watching me? Or worse, what if he had been outside for longer than I realized and I hadn't even noticed? I didn't want to go upstairs to get my phone. If I did, I would have to turn my back to the window, and I didn't trust that I'd still be safe if I did. My only choice was to wait, but that silence, it was unbearable. For a few minutes, everything felt still, the night outside as quiet as it had been before. I thought maybe he'd gone, maybe it was all in my head. But then I heard something again, a faint tapping at the window right next to where I had been peering out moments before. I jumped back, heart leaping into my throat. No way. It couldn't be him. He couldn't have moved that fast. I didn't dare look again. Instead, I slowly backed away from the door, retreating to the back of the living room. Every instinct was telling me to run, but I was frozen in place, my mind screaming at me to stay calm, to think, to figure out what to do next. My body was shaking as I slowly moved toward the staircase. I wasn't going to sit here in the dark waiting for God knows what to happen. I needed to call for help, and fast. I hurried upstairs, trying to move quietly so I wouldn't give away my position. The stairs creaked under my weight, and every sound seemed 10 times louder than usual. I rushed into my room, locking the door behind me. I immediately grabbed my phone from the desk, my hands trembling as I unlocked it. I went straight to the contacts and dialed 911. My heart pounded in my chest while the phone rang, my mind racing. What if he was still out there? What if he could hear me on the phone? Finally, the dispatcher answered. 911, what's your emergency? I quickly told them everything, trying to keep my voice steady. I explained about the strange guy, the Instagram messages, how he had been outside my house, and how I thought he was still lurking around. I was almost out of breath as I spoke, panic rising again. Stay calm. Are you in a secure place right now? The dispatcher asked. Yes, I'm upstairs in my room. The doors are locked. I don't know what he's doing, but he's been outside my house for a while now. I don't know if he's still there. I'm scared he might try to come in. All right, we're sending an officer to your location. Stay inside and keep the doors locked. Do not open the door for anyone unless you're sure it's the police. Understood? I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Yeah, I understand. The line went quiet for a moment, and I could hear the dispatcher typing something on her end. My eyes darted to the window, half expecting to see him standing there again, just like before. Okay, we have someone en route. Stay calm and keep the phone with you, the dispatcher said before hanging up. I set the phone down on my bed, trying to steady my breathing. I wasn't alone anymore. The police were on their way. But what if it was too late? What if he was already inside? My hands were clammy and I felt a wave of nausea hit me. I waited for what felt like forever. Every second felt like an hour. Every creak of the house made my heart skip a beat. Was he still out there? Was he trying to get in? Or had he left by now? I didn't dare go near the window again, not after what had happened before. I felt like the walls were closing in on me. The next few minutes felt like a lifetime. I kept my eyes locked on the door, half expecting him to just appear, standing in the doorway like some nightmare come to life. I tried to ignore the voice in my head telling me I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't safe. I grabbed my phone again, checking for any updates. No messages, no missed calls, nothing. It made me feel even more isolated, even more alone in this. I tried to call my parents, but I couldn't bring myself to press the dial button. They were out of the city and I didn't want to freak them out. Besides, it wouldn't do me any good now. They wouldn't be able to make it home in time. It was up to me to stay strong and get through this until the police arrived. Then suddenly I heard it, a faint sound from downstairs, a soft scraping noise like something or someone was gently tapping against the window. My breath hitched. Was it him? Was he testing the windows now? I had locked everything, hadn't I? My pulse began to race as I heard it again, a little louder this time. Tap, tap, tap. I couldn't stay locked up in my room anymore. The uncertainty was eating at me and I had to know what was going on. If he was really out there, I had to see it for myself. The thought of just sitting here while he was right outside, knowing what he was doing, was unbearable. I gripped the door handle tightly, my fingers white with fear. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I didn't want to lose my nerve. There was no turning back now. Slowly, I opened the door, careful not to make a sound. The house was dead quiet. I stepped out into the hallway, my heart thundering in my chest. I had to remind myself to keep calm. The worst thing I could do right now was panic. I crept to the stairs and slowly descended, trying to stay as quiet as possible. Each step felt like a mile. I glanced over the banister, looking down into the dark living room, half expecting to see him standing there watching me. But there was nothing, just silence. I made it down to the first floor and tiptoed toward the window. I peeked out through the blinds, my breath held in my chest. The front yard was still dark, but I didn't see him. I squinted, trying to make sense of the shadows. No movement, but then I heard something. A sound, soft and almost imperceptible, coming from the side of the house. Thump. It came from the side yard. It sounded like someone was walking, but not on the concrete. It was a heavy, slow step, like they were walking on the grass or dirt. And then, silence again. I pulled away from the window, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from my chest. I couldn't see anything, but I knew something was out there. I couldn't just stay here. I had to do something. I grabbed my phone again, my hands shaking as I sent a quick message to the police, explaining what was happening. I didn't know if they were close, but I needed to tell someone. I took another deep breath and decided to check the side of the house myself. I couldn't just hide forever. I was tired of waiting. I was ready to face whatever this was. I moved to the back door and carefully opened it, stepping into the cool night air. My breath hung in the air in front of me, the night colder than usual. I didn't want to be out here, but I had no choice. I moved quickly but quietly, staying near the house and out of view of the street. I crept around the side of the house, my eyes darting around. There at the corner I saw something that made my blood run cold. A shadow. Someone was standing there, near the edge of the house, half hidden in the darkness. My heart stopped. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I had no idea who this was, but I knew it wasn't Johnny Flowers 24. Whoever this was, they were standing in the shadows, not moving, staring at the house. Watching. I backed up slowly, my foot catching on something behind me. The last thing I wanted was to make a sound, but it was too late. The figure turned. For a brief moment, our eyes locked, and I could see his face, pale in the dim light. He had a strange, unblinking stare. He didn't say a word, just stood there frozen. And that was when I knew I had to get inside. Now, without thinking, I spun around and bolted back toward the door. My legs felt like lead, but I pushed myself forward, desperate to get inside before whatever that was could catch up to me. The feeling of being watched, of someone's eyes on my back, was overwhelming. My heart was pounding in my chest, each beat louder than the next as I hurried to the door. I reached for the handle, but my hand was shaking so badly it almost slipped. I quickly steadied myself and yanked it open, stumbling into the hallway and slamming the door shut behind me. I felt a rush of relief as I locked it, but I couldn't let my guard down yet. The sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and steady, sounded from the other side of the door. My blood turned to ice. Whoever it was wasn't in a hurry. They were pacing, almost as if they were taking their time. My mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. I was trapped in my own house, alone. I grabbed my phone from my pocket again, my hands still trembling. I tried to call the police, but the call wouldn't go through. I tried again, but the same thing. My heart dropped. No signal, of course. Why would it be that easy? I needed a plan. Fast. My eyes darted around the hallway, trying to figure out what to do next. The stairs were just a few feet away, but I didn't want to risk going up there and getting cornered. I could hear the footsteps getting closer, the soft creak of the floorboards under weight. That's when I heard a voice. I just want to talk. It was low, almost a whisper, but it was clear. The voice was unfamiliar, cold. I froze in place, my blood running cold. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The person from the side yard had followed me inside, and now they were standing just outside the door. I pressed my back against the door, holding it shut as if my life depended on it. Please, come out. The voice was persistent, pleading, but it didn't sound sincere. It sounded more like an order, as if they were used to getting their way. I didn't know what to do. I was frozen, paralyzed with fear. Should I call someone again? Should I run? The door was my only barrier, and I couldn't afford to lose it. I could hear the person shifting their weight outside. There was a long pause, and then bang! The sound of a fist hitting the door made me jump. The force was enough to make the whole frame shake. My breath hitched in my throat, and I instinctively backed away. I couldn't stay here. I had to do something. The footsteps continued. I could feel them circling, moving slowly, deliberately. The person was toying with me. The silence that followed made everything worse. Was he waiting for me to make a move? Was he just going to stand there until I gave in? I didn't waste a second. The pounding outside the door echoed in my ears as I sprinted toward the nearby table. My mind was running a million miles per hour, but instinct kicked in. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a large, wooden lamp, and dragged it across the floor, slamming it into the door with all my strength. It wasn't much, but it would slow him down, at least for a moment. The sound of footsteps outside grew more frantic, as though the person was now in a hurry. My heart raced even faster as I hurried back to the hallway, looking for anything else that could help. I spotted an old broom lying against the wall in the corner. Without thinking, I snatched it up, positioning myself by the stairs, ready for whatever came next. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could feel my own pulse in my ears as I stood there, clutching the broom like it was some sort of weapon. My thoughts were a blur. Was he still out there? Was he going to break through the door? Or was he just waiting for me to make the first move? I crept closer to the door, pressing my ear against the wood, trying to hear any movement. Nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing, ragged and heavy. Then, suddenly, I heard it scratching. It started soft, almost like something dragging against the wood, but then it grew louder. The unmistakable sound of nails or something else scraping against the door. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My grip on the broom tightened. It wasn't just the door. I could hear the scratching move toward the window. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. There was no way I was going near the windows. If he was outside, I wasn't going to give him any opportunity to get inside. But I needed to know what was going on. I had to see. I slowly moved toward the window, my mind still racing. I didn't dare make a sound. I pressed my back to the wall, inching toward the window like a shadow, hoping that if I moved slowly enough, he wouldn't notice. When I finally peered through the crack in the blinds, my stomach turned. The guy, Johnny Flowers, 24, was standing outside, staring right at the window. I don't know how long he'd been there, but I could see the gleam of his eyes through the darkness. He wasn't smiling anymore. His expression was almost serious. His face was too pale in the low light, and the hair around his face hung messily, hiding his features even more. I gasped softly and stepped back, feeling the weight of panic hit me like a ton of bricks. I tried to stay calm, but the adrenaline in my veins made everything feel unreal. I couldn't just sit here and wait for him to make the next move. I needed to get out of here. I couldn't just stay hidden behind the curtains forever. As much as I wanted to lock myself away in that room, pretending everything was normal, I knew I had to do something. I needed to know what this guy wanted, and I needed him to leave before things got worse. I took a deep breath and leaned closer to the window, trying to keep as quiet as possible. Johnny Flowers, 24, was still standing there, his eyes locked onto the house. His gaze didn't shift for a second, and it made me feel even more exposed, as if he could see right through the walls. I wiped my sweaty palms on my pants and decided to try talking to him, from the safety of the window, of course. The last thing I wanted was to open the door and have him rush inside. "Hey," I called out softly, my voice cracking a little. I could barely hear myself over the pounding of my heart. "What do you want?" For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then his face twitched. The slightest hint of a smile tugged at the corner of his lips, but it wasn't the smile I had seen the first time we met. This one was different. It felt unsettling. He tilted his head almost as if he was confused by the question. "You don't remember me?" he asked, his voice just loud enough for me to hear through the glass. I could barely comprehend what he meant. "What? You've been messaging me, but I don't even know who you are." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer to the window and I instinctively stepped back. His face was now just a few inches from the glass, and the light from the street lamps caught the eerie shine in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to scare you," he said in a soft, almost apologetic tone. "But I've been trying to get your attention. I saw you on Instagram. You seemed interesting." A chill ran down my spine. Was he really trying to apologize? This was not normal. This was way beyond whatever attention he was talking about. "I don't even know you," I said, my voice steadier now, but my hands were still shaking. I looked away for a second, trying to gather my thoughts. "Why are you doing this? Why are you outside my house?" He stood there, quiet for a long moment. I could see the uncertainty in his eyes, like he didn't quite understand what was wrong. Then he stepped back slightly, as if he was giving me space to breathe. "I'm sorry," he repeated. I thought we could be friends, but I guess I made you uncomfortable. I'll leave now." His words felt like a strange mix of sincerity and confusion, but something in my gut told me that wasn't the whole story. I still felt the knot in my stomach, the unease that wouldn't go away. But for some reason, I was starting to feel sorry for him. Was this some kind of mental breakdown or a twisted way of seeking attention? I didn't know what to say. He was still standing there, waiting for a response, but my instinct told me to just end this. "Just go," I said, my voice firm but with a hint of sympathy. "Please just go." His eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read. He turned slowly, giving me one last glance before walking away from the window. His steps were slow, dragging as though he didn't want to leave. But soon I heard him turn and disappear into the shadows, his figure swallowed by the night. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, my heart still racing. I stayed by the window for a while, watching, just to be sure he didn't come back. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, but for now, at least, the danger seemed to have passed. I couldn't shake the feeling that something still wasn't right. Even though Johnny Flowers, 24, had left, I had to check. There had to be something on my phone that would explain his behavior, something that could reassure me, or maybe confirm my worst fears. I grabbed my phone from the table next to the window, swiping the screen to unlock it. My hands were still a little shaky, but I forced myself to stay calm. I opened Instagram and navigated to my messages. There was nothing new from my friends, but then I saw it, another message from him. "I'm sorry, but I think we're meant to be together. I hope you'll understand." The message made my stomach drop. It was the same eerie tone, the same unsettling feeling that had come from his words outside. But this time, it was worse. The words themselves weren't just creepy, they were possessive. I stared at the screen, trying to process it. What did he mean by "we're meant to be together"? I barely knew the guy. Then, something caught my eye. At the very top of the message thread, right under his username, there was a timestamp. The message had been sent while he was still standing outside my window. I felt my breath catch in my throat. How did he know where I was? How could he have sent that message while standing outside? That's when I realized the connection. All this time, I thought he was just some random guy who found me on Instagram. But now, seeing that message, I wasn't so sure. Was this guy stalking me even before we spoke in person? Had he been watching me for longer than I realized? I felt a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. This wasn't just about some harmless interaction anymore. This was something deeper, something dangerous. I quickly scrolled through the rest of the conversation to find any other messages, but there was nothing new. He'd only sent that one message and then nothing. I hesitated, then hit the block button. It felt like the right thing to do, but even as I did it, I couldn't shake the sense that I hadn't seen the last of him. I felt a rush of exhaustion hit me. My mind was racing, but my body was drained. Maybe I could sleep this off, pretend like it was all just a bad dream. I could get up tomorrow and go back to my normal life, as if nothing had happened. I turned off my phone and the room fell into silence once again. The faint sound of wind outside the window was the only noise that lingered in the air, but even that couldn't fully calm me down. I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling. My thoughts kept spiraling, thoughts of Johnny Flowers, 24, and the strange messages, of the way he had stared at me through the window, unblinking. I tried to close my eyes, but every time I did, I saw his face. That creepy grin, his unnerving presence standing outside, waiting for me to notice him. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, somewhere. I rolled over and reached for my phone again. I needed reassurance. I called the police and they promised they'd be on their way soon. They said they would take care of it and that everything would be fine. But the longer I waited, the harder it was to trust that everything would be okay. Suddenly, I heard a soft knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly grabbed my phone and checked the time. It was 2:30 in the morning. Who could it be? I cautiously walked to the door and peered through the peephole. It was the police, finally. I opened the door and 2 officers walked inside, their presence bringing a sense of relief that I desperately needed. "Are you okay?" one of them asked, his voice calm but firm. I don't know," I replied. "I've been getting these weird messages and someone was outside my house. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm scared." The officers exchanged a look, then nodded. "We're going to check the area around your house. Stay inside. You're safe now." They went outside to survey the surroundings, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. My phone buzzed again and my heart skipped a beat. I checked it, hoping it was just a message from my friend telling me everything was okay. It wasn't. The message was from Johnny Flowers, 24. "I told you we were meant to be together. You can't hide from me forever." I froze. The message was unsettling enough, but what happened next sent a chill down my spine. I heard a loud thud outside, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Someone was walking around the yard. I rushed to the window, and as I looked out into the darkness, I saw movement near the edge of my yard. A shadow, tall and unmistakable. It was him, Johnny Flowers, 24. But this time, there was something different. There was a feeling in the air, an energy that told me this was just the beginning. The police hadn't found him. He wasn't going away. The officers were still outside, unaware of the danger that loomed just beyond their view. I couldn't help but feel that this was far from over. I stood frozen at the window, staring at the figure that loomed in the darkness. Johnny Flowers, 24, or whoever he was standing in my yard, but this time he wasn't looking up at my window. His head was lowered, his back slightly hunched as though he was waiting for something, or someone. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't make sense of it. Why was he still out there? What was he waiting for? I didn't want to take any chances. I grabbed my phone again, this time dialing 911. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it, but I managed to keep the call steady. 911, what's your emergency? I think someone is still outside my house, I said, my voice trembling. I told the officers earlier. They're here, but they haven't found him. He's still out there. I can see him through my window. He's just standing there. The operator's voice was calm, but I could tell she was taking me seriously. Stay inside and keep the door locked. The police are already on their way. We'll make sure they know about the suspect. The line went quiet for a moment as the operator relayed the information, and I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. But the more I stared out at the figure, the more unnerved I became. Seconds felt like hours, and I kept hoping the police would show up soon. But suddenly, the shadow moved, slowly, like it was testing the ground. That's when I saw it, the flicker of a flashlight. The police had arrived. The officers from earlier were standing at the edge of the yard now, shining their flashlights toward the shadowy figure. Johnny Flowers, 24, flinched at the light, and for a split second, I thought he might run. But he didn't. Instead, he took a step forward, raising his hands slowly, like he was giving up. My heart hammered in my chest as the officers advanced toward him, one of them calling out to him, "Stay right there, don't move." The guy didn't make a sound. He was still, almost eerily so. He just stood there as if he had been waiting for this moment. The officers moved in closer, and that's when I saw it clearly for the first time. The man was wearing a strange smile, but it wasn't friendly. It was unsettling. A grin that seemed to stretch far too wide for someone's face. But then, as the officers moved closer, something surprising happened. Johnny Flowers, 24, dropped his grin, and for a brief moment, his eyes darted toward me, as if he knew I was watching. Before anything else could happen, one of the officers grabbed him, pulling his arm behind his back to restrain him. They handcuffed him quickly, and I heard one of them speak into their radio, confirming they had him in custody. My heart slowed as I watched the scene unfold. The officer approached the house and knocked on my door. I opened it cautiously, still shaken but relieved. "We've got him," the officer said, his voice steady. "You're safe now. You were right to call us." I nodded, still in disbelief. "What happens now?" "He's going to be questioned. We'll find out exactly what he was doing here," the officer replied. "We're going to take him down to the station, but I'll tell you one thing. This guy had been following you for quite some time. He had a whole list of your social media posts. This wasn't just a random encounter." A chill ran down my spine at the thought. This guy had been watching me, probably from the very start. The weird comments, the strange DMs, the way he just appeared out of nowhere. It all made sense now. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The officer gave me a reassuring smile. "It's our job. Just make sure you keep your accounts private from now on." "All right," I nodded. And as the police car drove off with Johnny Flowers, 24, in the backseat, I closed the door behind me and locked it. I didn't think I'd ever feel comfortable again with my phone in my hand, knowing someone had been tracking me. But for now, at least, the nightmare was over. Johnny Flowers, 24, was later identified as a local man with a history of stalking people online, and it turned out he had been watching my social media for weeks. When the police questioned him, he admitted to following me home from school on multiple occasions, and that creepy encounter with him outside my house wasn't his first. He had been waiting for the perfect moment to approach. After he was taken into custody, the police found evidence that he had done this to other people as well, and he was charged with multiple counts of stalking. It took a while for me to feel completely safe again. I changed my online accounts, tightened my privacy settings, and started keeping a closer eye on who I followed and who followed me. It was a lesson learned the hard way. But for now, everything was calm, at least until the next time I checked my phone.